The fallout from the mushroom cloud of controversy surrounding the nuclear reaction to the Trayvon Martin verdict continues. As the talking heads make their rounds of divisive fodder on the controlled mainstream media, the most important issues facing America are ignored. There has been an amplified call to address the black community's angry reaction to the Zimmerman verdict with a deafening silence to the root causes of the problem. In his recent controversial race speech, Obama reiterated an inconvenient truth about how blacks are racially profiled, how many people wait at a stoplight and roll up their windows and lock their car doors if they see a black man approaching on the street, or blacks scrutinized by store security guards. Republican talking heads are foolishly denying that these reactions ever occur. Whether or not my friend Alan West and others have been profiled, the sad truth is that it does occur. In fact, you yourself may have slapped the locks on your car doors when a black man approached, or cautiously guarded your purse in an elevator. It's okay, it's not your fault. You were conditioned to react that way. It is a Pavlovian response. The truth is, interestingly enough, this social paranoia is not justified, since whites commit far more crime, almost 70%, compared to 25% committed by blacks. So why this irrational paranoia? The answer, 100-plus years of social control mechanisms that painted the contrived and oblique view of blacks. In 1915, Freemason D. Wark Griffith released The Birth of a Nation, also known as The Klansman. When the film was shown, riots broke out in Boston, Philadelphia, and other major cities. Chicago, Denver, Kansas City, Minneapolis, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis refused to allow the film to open. Still, The Birth of a Nation was a tremendous box office hit. Jaws, Star Wars, Titanic, and Avatar all rolled into one. It was also fiercely racist, portraying black men as savages out to rape white women. The Masonic Order of the KKK, which had its rebirth that same year in 1915, were depicted as heroes, saving the honor of white womanhood from the savages of the Negro race. That started the modern myth of black-on-white crime. The film became a catalyst for gangs of whites to attack blacks. In Lafayette, Indiana, after seeing the film, a white man murdered a black teenager. In 1915, the NAACP was not a front for antagonizing racism, but rather a true force against it. Over time, the NAACP was co-opted by the Fabian Socialists and morphed into the divisive organization it is today. The NAACP protested premieres of the film in numerous cities. It also conducted a public education campaign, publishing articles protesting the film's fabrications and inaccuracies, organizing petitions against it, and conducting education on the facts of the war and Reconstruction. In 1915, Hollywood was already defacing history by master storyteller and master mason D. Wark Griffith. Considering the role of Freemasonry and the KKK, it is ironic that Barack Hussein Obama himself is a Freemason. During World War I, a famous propaganda poster was circulated depicting a German soldier as a guerrilla clutching a white woman in his grip while holding a bat with the word culture, C-U-L-T-U-R, misspelled across it, and wearing a spiked German helmet. This type of anti-black propaganda in posters and in cinema depicting blacks as inferior, ignorant, and dangerous to the virtuousness of white women helped to promulgate racism for generations. So if 70% of crime in America is committed by whites, why is it our prison population is almost 85% black? There are several reasons for this. One of the major issues, circumstances in the black community, are a result of decades of dumbing down the American education system, which targets black communities with the worst education standards based on leniency, which creates low performance. The second major issue, which complements the first, is the growing welfare state. Social programs that create dependence on the government, as opposed to individual responsibility and opportunity for individual achievement and upward mobility. Martin Luther King argued that blacks cannot pull themselves up by the bootstraps if the boot is held down by the oppressive forces against fairness and equality. King was right. He wasn't talking about social welfare. He was talking about social equality for upward mobility. Although conditions in the black community have improved since the 1960s, the elite socialist forces in our government have translated Martin Luther King's dream of freedom and equality for the black community into a nightmare of dependence on the government and social programs. Unfortunately, due to a plethora of seductive and alluring influences attacking the senses with mainstream media pop culture iconography, upward mobility to many in the black community means aspiring to become drug dealers and rap stars, or both. That brings me to the third issue. The fact that the CIA helped to create the crack cocaine epidemic in the 1980s by supplying tons of cocaine to Freeway Rick Ross via CIA asset Oscar Danilo Blandón and Norwin Meneses, two Nicaraguan nationals with ties to the Contras who used the profits they earned from selling Ross massive amounts of cocaine to fund the Contra war effort. Here is a quote from Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper, written in 1991. For many years, the secret government has been importing drugs and selling them to the people, mainly the poor and minorities. The social welfare programs were put into place to create a dependent, non-working element in our society. The government encouraged the manufacture and importation of military firearms for the criminals to use. This is intended to foster a feeling of insecurity which would lead the American people to voluntarily disarm themselves by passing laws against firearms. End quote. Now, hasn't that happened? Doesn't Fast and Furious come to mind? The relentless attack on the Second Amendment after every shooting that they publicize and dramatize and downplay when a homeowner takes out a perp trying to rob them or worse. That never gets publicized. It's always the reverse. The victim. The people have to be victims so that they can give up their rights so that the big brother establishment can take care of them. Soviet-styled indoctrination in schools has resulted in a dumbing down of America unprecedented in our history since the days of slavery.
What crack basically did was destroy morals and values in the black family. Because with most black families nowadays, there is no such thing as morals and values. You got some of these hood rats that care more about getting high than they do their own child. They care more about getting drunk and getting high than they do their own kids. And this is the biggest problem in the black community. Now, we all know that the CIA is responsible for spreading crack cocaine in the black communities during the 1980s. But that doesn't mean that we had to take the bait. It still doesn't excuse us as black people for allowing this drug to destroy our black communities. No matter how many drugs get transported into the black communities, that still doesn't excuse us as black people for taking the bait. If you smoke crack, only you should be responsible for what you're doing wrong. Any person that has common sense knows what crack will do to you. Every person has a family member that's addicted to drugs. And every person has seen what these drugs has done to that family member. So why would you follow the same path that you see another person doing?
By targeting the family unit, the cultural Marxists knew they could eventually destroy the middle class of the United States. Why? Because the family unit is the basic building block of the middle class. Destroy the middle class, and you eventually destroy the economic engine of the United States.
It is social decay via cultural manipulation, cultural Marxism. The major foundations have funded all of this research. They're eugenicists. They paid for Planned Parenthood to be put together. They believe in reducing the black population. The elitists, and their intention is working. Another great film to watch is Ma'afa 21, which covers this. When you put these pieces together, you will see the puzzle. And unfortunately, Obama serves the New World Order, not the American people. After all, he speaks a lot about the Constitution in his speeches, while he eviscerates it, taking away our rights, spying on us. Oh, for national security.
Communism is an economic system whereby the state owns the means of production. Means of production meaning capital. Capital meaning money, machinery, labor, land, and resources. Socialism is an economic system whereby the state owns the fruits of production. Fruits of production meaning revenues generated by the means. Revenues generated by the means is another way of saying taxes.
Extreme of socialism was the Soviet system, communism. So there was no pricing structure, and it's a failed system. It can't work because prices are so important.
So communism owns and confiscates the means and fruits of production, whereas socialism confiscates just the fruits of production in the form of excessive taxes. Socialist states in Europe, for instance, confiscate as much as 50% of the money citizens pay for retail products and services. This is the outrageous sales tax a socialist state demands.
We interfere a lot, but we allow prices to adjust in the marketplace for the most part. But when it comes to interest rates, the Federal Reserve is always deciding the central plan through the control of money and interest rates, how much money we should have in circulation, and should we shrink the money supply, expand the money supply. And that's a form of socialism, but it's only half of socialism because it's controlling only half of the transaction, and that's money. But it's very dangerous and leads to an authoritarian approach because it eventually breaks down, and I think that's what we're witnessing today.
Thus, a socialist state rapes the people mainly through excessive taxes. A fascist state rapes the people mainly through excessive debt. Both ultimately rape the people through taxes because debt causes inflation, a hidden tax. Debt causes inflation because the Federal Reserve System facilitates the conversion of government bonds, government IOUs, into Federal Reserve notes, what we use as a currency.
Well, the Federal Reserve, in its very nature, is contrary to a free market. The Federal Reserve is not only regulating, but it's manipulating the marketplace against the will of the people who are conducting the marketplace.
When this is done, the money supply is inflated. When the money supply is inflated, it becomes watered down or diluted. Just like stock, when a corporation authorizes and issues more stock, existing shareholders are diluted. When money is diluted, it has less purchasing power. When it has less purchasing power, prices rise because it takes more Federal Reserve notes to purchase a given product. When prices rise, it has the effect of a tax. Inflation is therefore a hidden tax.
If the government can create new money that it doesn't have to tax for, and especially if it can put off the ultimate payment of this into the future through the use of long-term bonds that are the backing for the fiat currency, then we have a government that is essentially out of control to some degree. It can make decisions that are not immediately going to subject the people to pressure.
The whole point of a socialistic society is to do four things. Marx talks about destroying the family, 2, destroying property, 3, destroying religion, and 4, destroying the nation. And what you end up with is the gulag, where the whole country becomes the Soviet Union.
Yes, critical theory is diabolical genius. The cultural Marxist could accomplish what Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin only dreamed of accomplishing. Whereas Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin took Marx's ideas and delivered the brutal Soviet Union to the world, Gramsci, Lukács, and Marcuse took Marx's ideas and delivered user-friendly cultural Marxism to America.
The Supreme Court has been converted into a fighting ally of secularism in the wars against traditionalism in the United States. The Supreme Court has perverted the Constitution. It has usurped power that belongs to the states and imposed secular views and values on the states and on the communities, making decisions that used to be made democratically at the local level.
This time it seems Marx won. Today, post-Engel, politically correct baby boomers are so completely immersed in the Frankfurt School's cultural pessimism, they can't see the forest for the trees. They're fish in a bowl of muddy water. They're Neo in the Matrix.
The social decay, the moral decay, the deindustrialization. So again, it's an oxymoron. Obama backs Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood kills hundreds of thousands of black babies every year. In fact, they've killed 13 million since Roe versus Wade. It's a targeted population. That was why they wanted to pass it. Everyone thinks about it's all about women's right to choose. You see Kerry Washington screaming about, we have those right, we fought for this right to be exterminated.